Just going to leave that story there. Live to Anthony Albanese holding a news conference. Let's have a listen in.
And I think all Australians' heart goes out to all the victims of the tragedies that have occurred, and particularly in terms of Sam, whose truck overturned near Albury. His wife is pregnant with their first child. I think it brings home just how tragic this period has been for our country. I do want to welcome the rains that are impacting on parts of southeastern Australia. It is a very good thing that that is happening, and one can only hope that as many fires are put out as possible by this welcome relief. It's a time to reiterate our thanks to our firefighters, to our Defence Reserves, other emergency workers, welfare workers. It is also a time, though, to say that Andrew Constance has given, once again, a very sound warning on behalf of his local community that donations and government payments are not flowing quickly enough to deal with the humanitarian crisis that his community and communities throughout southeastern Australia are facing, as well as, of course, parts of South Australia. We need to make sure that support gets to those people who need it right now, because one of the lessons of past tragedies is that any delay will not only impact on the people who need that support right now, it will also have an economic impact on top of the human impact, because the cost will be more because of the time delay which is there. And I do believe that we need to make sure that that support is not done in a political way. I have been disturbed that Stuart Robert, the minister who's responsible for rolling out much of that support through government services, attended the area covered by Mike Kelly and Eden Monaro and Fiona Phillips in Gilmore, who happened to be Labor members, but took a Liberal Party senator, newly elected, newly reappointed, Jim Molan, rather than conducted himself in an appropriate way by going with the local MPs. I note that stands in stark contrast with the actions of someone like David Littleproud, who's been out there with Susan Templeman. This is not a time for partisan politics. And one of the things that's characterised the coalition government has been excess of partisanship, whether it be the sports rorts affair that we're seeing, or whether it be some of the response to these bushfire tragedies. So I say to the government and to the Prime Minister that now's not a time to allocate support or information on the basis of partisanship. Now's a time to ensure that communities get the support that they need, regardless of whose electorate they're in, right across the board. And I've been in contact with people, MPs, both coalition MPs, as well as Labor MPs, as well as independents like Rebecca Sharkey, to ask what support and advocacy I can do during this crisis. Happy to take questions.
Mr Albanese, on the bushfire, you've called for the government to implement strong climate action, but how do you reconcile that when in December you went on a tour of Queensland coal mines?
But I didn't. Which ones did I go to?
Sorry, I might have misspoke there.
Which ones should I go to? Well,
you supported coal exports in the past.
Well, which ones did I go to? Because you made a statement that's been repeated a number of times that actually isn't true. So.
Okay.
It isn't true. I visited Queensland. Yep. I visited Queensland, and one of the things that annoys Queenslanders is the view that people from the south know more about Queensland than they do. I went to Queensland. I began in Barcaldine, the place where the Labor Party was formed. I went to Emerald. I went to Rockhampton. In Rockhampton, I met with people who are advocates for new firefighting equipment in terms of aircraft, the McDonald's. And I met also with the local newspaper up there, the Rockhampton Bully, about volunteer firefighter support. I then went to Gladstone, which is looking at, through the aluminium refinery at Rio Tinto, looking at a shift to renewable energy, because what that will do is enable it to operate for longer, cheaper. They're looking at being solar powered. I then went to Maryborough, looking at what's happening there with rail manufacturing. Rail manufacturing, of course, it relies upon steel, which is produced, of course, through metallurgical coal. I then went to Hervey Bay and looked at tourism facilities there. I went to Bundaberg and went to the Bundaberg Rum Factory, which is an example of manufacturing, production, export, but also tourism facility. I went to Gympie and had a look at a macadamia farm there and the impact that the drought was having on them. And on the Sunshine Coast, I look at communities that have been impacted by the bushfires, as I did in Yeppoon. One of the things about the media and the debate about climate change is that quite often people are looking for slogans and 2 words without looking at any detail. The question that you just asked is an example of something that's been repeated in the media, in some outlets, a number of times. It's wrong. It's not what happened. I make no apologies for going to Queensland to talk to Queenslanders about issues that they're interested in, particularly about jobs. I'll continue to do that.
Mr Albanese, Peter Dutton says that there is no environmental benefit to be had by stopping exports of Australian coal. Is this a position you agree with? Is this sort of a rare occasion where you agree with Mr Dutton?
Well, in the short term, I think I have seen Peter Dutton's comments. And what Peter Dutton has said is that if you stopped exporting coal from Australia immediately, well, I won't paraphrase, I'll say what my view is, the risk of misquoting him. If you stopped exporting coal immediately, then that would not reduce global emissions because there's enough displacement from other coal exporting countries to take up that position, and that coal will produce higher emissions rather than less emissions.
Senator Bridget McKenzie insists she did nothing wrong in regards to the allocation of government sports grants, saying all clubs were eligible for funding. Is that good enough?
Well, this is just a disgrace. What we've seen here is a government that is arrogant, that in the lead up to the federal election used taxpayers' money as if it was Liberal and National Party funding. You had circumstances whereby Georgina Downer, who was a candidate, not a member of Parliament, was handed over an oversized cheque as if she was responsible for the grant and as if that was her money. She wasn't even a member of Parliament. You had circumstances whereby Graham Perrott, who assisted a local soccer club in his electorate, get a $135,000 grant. It was announced by the Liberal candidate for Moreton. This is quite extraordinary and unprecedented. This is outrageous behaviour by a government that really believes that it has a right to do whatever it likes, whenever it likes, wherever it likes. And the truth is that her position is untenable as a minister. You have circumstances whereby there is an Australian sports body made up of experts due to make recommendations about these grants, and they were ignored in favour of political decisions as if they were election commitments, but they weren't even that. They were funding from decisions by a minister with no basis, that ignored the advice that was given to her.
Mr Albanese, you say that Senator McKenzie's position is untenable. In February, after you copped $500,000 for Dawn Fraser Bars, he said in a statement, "I thank her for campaigning for future investment in this precious asset." How do you reconcile that?
Sorry, I'm not sure what the quote is.
You got $500,000 for Dawn Fraser Bars
Yep.
through this exact same program, so it can't have been all bad.
Well, the fact is that grants that went through the process
Are you sure that yours
were appropriate. Well, what I did was support grants for my electorate. That's what members of parliament will do. What this minister did, and I've been the minister for regional and local community infrastructure program, what we established was a grants program whereby every single local government area in the country received support. Dawn Fraser Baths is the oldest swimming baths in Australia. It's heritage listed. It frankly is falling apart and needs more investment to make sure that it doesn't simply drift off into the harbour.
And through this program, Senator McKenzie gave you that funding.
Well, I'm not saying that every decision that she made was wrong. What I am saying is that the process was totally wrong, whereby she made political decisions based upon the marginality of electorates, and quite clearly to have circumstances whereby, I'm sure in this case, what Bridget McKenzie didn't do was have the Liberal Party candidate for Greenlaw make the announcement. And that just reinforces how inappropriate this process is. Because if Greenlaw was a seat where the Liberal Party candidate could have had a chance of winning, perhaps Bridget McKenzie wouldn't have advised in the normal way what the process was. What she would have done was advise the Liberal candidate and they would have announced it. That's what's inappropriate here, the politicisation whereby local members have been ignored because they happen to be in marginal electorates.
Mr Albanese, if Dawn Fraser Baths wasn't eligible, and there were other sporting clubs around Australia that were eligible ahead of Dawn Fraser Baths, would you give the money back?
Well, it's not my money.
No, but would you ask the Inner West Council to give the money back?
It's not my money. It's not my money. That's the point here. This is taxpayers' money that should go through a proper process, and that is the basis in terms of this grant procedure. This Audit Office report of Bridget McKenzie is scathing about what she did. And it's not surprising that if a minister wants to cover themselves and take out some insurance, they'll give a couple of grants in electorates from the other side in safe seats in order to be able to point to it down the track.
On the same token, would you describe the Labor sports rorts scandal years ago as a disgrace?
What years are you talking about?
The Labor lost a sports minister under very similar circumstances.
The minister resigned. The minister resigned.
Yeah, so do you think, would you characterise
the minister resigned.
Disgrace?
The minister resigned, and I suggest this minister needs to resign as well.
Are we in a position though, like isn't the point that the public here just looks at this and says, you're all the same?
No, because the fact is that the minister decades ago, literally, did resign her position. At that point in time, there weren't candidates who weren't members of parliament handing over oversized cheques as if it was their money. That didn't occur. What we have here is people who aren't elected to parliament handing over cheques with their name on them as if it's their money for grants, for proposals that didn't get the tick from the independent sports agency. That's what's occurred here. That's why this is red hot. That's why this minister's position is completely untenable. And this government continues to hang on to, be it Angus Taylor, with scandal after scandal after scandal, and Bridget McKenzie. It seems that there is nothing that any minister can do in Scott Morrison's government that warrant them considering their position. Thanks very much.